All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to NFTuesday. Our guest tonight is Michael J. Masucci, co-founder of EZTV, artist, curator, activist, has a lot to say tonight. We're very excited to have him here.
Thank you. I'm going to tell a story you may believe, a story you may not believe. All I can say is that I can prove everything I'm going to say. How do you tell a story that's so compelling, so complex, so convoluted, and seemingly so contradictory that you wonder why people don't know it? Welcome to the degaussed, evaporated, unrecorded, unremembered, unchronicled, and yet evolving out of its silo, a story called EZTV. Now, we define ourselves all too often by our tools. I'm using a microphone. I'm wearing shreds over my naked body. I'm wearing a device that tells me the time, the temperature, my texts, my emails, and anything else I want to put on it. More and more, we are not separated. We are not separated from each other, and we're not separated from our tools. Now, I know tools. Back in 1979, I was the bottom half of what was arguably the most advanced darkroom on the planet in a place called Martin Age Photographics in New York City. On a routine basis, we printed gigantic photo murals for the likes of Richard Avedon, Francesco Scavullo, Hero, the posthumous collections of Philippe Halsman and Ansel Adams. If it meant something in the world of photography, my dirty little fingerprints probably stuck on its negative at some point. We had a darkroom. The enlargers were the size of small cars on railroad tracks, among the first computerized in the world. We used quartz halogen lighting at a time that was unheard of, and stroboscopics, and we designed our own chemicals. So tools were not something I had any problem dealing with. A decade later, I'm in West Hollywood, California, and I built, along with my colleagues, a space called EZTV. Now, all that really is left of EZTV, other of about 1,000 square feet at the 18th Street Arts Center, is a website, a tool, a website. Now, how can we preserve and collect not only our stories, but I would argue it is our duty and imperative to collect all of your stories and everybody else's, because we cannot count on remembrance by academia. We cannot count on remembrance by the museum cultures, not out of malice, not out of anything incompetent, just because of the sheer volume of what human beings create. So I am going to advocate tonight. I'm not going to tell you much about my work. There'll be a few little slides that give you some hint that, yeah, I actually did something during my life. But I'm going to want to build a conversation that I hope will entice a few of you to join forces with the others like us in building a decentralized collective archive of our stories. So there's something called the EZTV Online Museum, and it's got about 100 videos on it. By the time it's finished, it'll probably have close to 1,000. It chronicles a number of events, some of whom there's a few people in here, like Victor Acevedo, who's the reason I was invited up here, and thank you, Dina and Cody, for allowing this to happen, and Dave Kurlander. Their roots go back to EZTV to 1984, but we began in 1979. But a disclaimer, Because very often when I make these speeches, some wise guy who's learned how to use a browser and type with his thumbs will scream out in the middle of my talk, "Hey, I just Googled you. You're being sued." So which EZTV are we? Are we the rock band in Brooklyn? They're actually pretty decent. I suggest you check them out. If you like alternative music, they're not too bad. Are we the notorious BitTorrent, where you can download episodes of Charlie's Angels and other copyrighted IP? Or are we an arts movement that started in West Hollywood by a bunch of gay guys in 1979? Well, guess who? So, this is the EZTV that matters. Now, I'm obviously biased, but I'm sorry, I can prove it. This is the EZTV that in 2019 received 5 events at the Centre de Pompidou. Nicolina, did I pronounce that right? Pompidou, okay. This is the EZTV that at the opening of the Getty's Pacific Standard Time had its logo projected onto the Getty in what was and still remains one of the largest digital projections ever seen in this part of the world. But you'll hear a little bit about more of that and a woman named Kate Johnson later. Now, I'm not going to tell you, like I said, a lot about me, but I am going to tell you a little about 4 people who are no longer here. And you cannot tell the story of EZTV without those people. This is John. John passed away on New Year's Day, 1993, of AIDS. John was openly gay at a time when that was career suicide. John realized early in his life that neither Hollywood nor the art world were going to let him do his stories that were queer-centric, that were celebratory of alternative lifestyles, and that he was not going to fit in. So he built his own world. And tools, he did it with a home half-inch analog Betamax machine, which I still have. And for those of you tech nerds who remember VCRs, you'd have trouble getting the clocks to work. The clock still works. John made 3 feature-length videos on that machine, one of which was shown at the Pompidou. And he didn't have editing equipment. He did it by shooting in sequence and hitting the pause button between setups, reverse angles, and even changes of location. Finally, for his 4th one, he did use an editing system. John self-produced. The word DIY is very commonplace these days. John was DIY. He made his own stuff. He went to the Xerox place, got cheap Xeroxes from stills he shot off the monitor on a film camera, hand-colored them, and he got people to show up. As I mentioned, John was queer. Most of his friends were queer. West Hollywood, which was not yet formally a city, was arguably the first openly gay city in the United States of America. Now, I'm a straight guy. I walk into EZTV and I found home, because what I found was cultural pluralism. What I found was non-judgmentalism. What I found was that people held back by society, judged by society, ridiculed by society, hated by society, were the most likely to let you be just who you are. So without ever having to have a formalized program, from day one and throughout its legacy, EZTV was always completely diverse. Now, that Betamax machine I showed you, James, who was the first art director at EZTV and the first gallery director, he used the same deck to make his own machines. In fact, John let anyone who wanted to use his Betamax deck, and it caused a revolution. But it couldn't have happened anywhere else but in West Hollywood, California, good old USA. Now, I said I was only going to talk about a few of my own work. Now, I'm a video maker and I'm a digital artist, whatever that means anymore. Who the heck isn't a digital artist? But I'm going to show you two pieces of mine that, well, one did use digital, but were basically something else. In 1986, as a joke, I'm from the South Bronx. I saw the beginnings of tagging. I saw the beginnings of graffiti as a bona fide folk art take power, take authority, take authorship of identity. And I decided as a joke, hey, wouldn't it be funny if on the hill next to the parking lot, we put up a sign that said West Hollywood? Wouldn't that be funny? Well, so we did. It cost $40, $40 of 1986 money, plywood and some paint and some stakes we stole from up in the attic, banged them into the hill next to EZTV, did not ask the landlord, send out a bunch of press releases declaring West Hollywood the video capital of the world on the 30th anniversary of the invention of videotape. And the press showed up. Now, we fully expected we were going to get busted. We never asked permission to do this. We just went and put it up there. So it's not only graffiti, but it's vandalism, it's trespass. There's a whole bunch of stuff that would have made us have a difficult day. But instead, West Hollywood embraced the West Hollywood sign. So in one of the most, I hate the phrase teachable moment, but in one of the most teachable moments of my life, I learned what art is and what art can be. It was a joke. It meant nothing to me. And suddenly the mayor is posing in front of it. Suddenly there are tours. Suddenly people keep stealing the letters. We keep remaking them until finally I got so tired, I let it disappear. I let it get completely stolen. It was up for about 4.5 years, and then finally there was the last letter gone. And I only regret I didn't keep one of them, but I didn't. Completely evaporated, degoused, erased. Until about 20 years later, my heart was broken when I read an essay by a young queer writer who said what that meant to him. As a teenager, he would ride the bus to school and it would pass the West Hollywood sign. And he said, and I quote, "When my mother would try to beat the gay out of me, I would think of the West Hollywood sign." That is what art can do. So when we talk about, oh, I use this server, oh, I use this software, oh, I use this tool, oh, I'm James Cameron, I've got a submarine. $40 and some paint, and it made a human being feel a little better at a really bad time. That is what art is, and that was not my intention, but that taught me why art must be at the center of every conversation, why every science project needs a lead artist, and why every art project needs a lead scientist. Thank you. Jump to 2014. Another misunderstanding, only this time the audience didn't get it. Now, 2014 was the 35th anniversary of EZTV, and USC took a bunch of our early stuff as part of their permanent archives, and they did 3 months of events, a 3-month art show, various screenings, panel discussions, and for our grand finale, we returned to our earliest roots, West Hollywood Park, and turned it into a site-specific live performance and video streaming installation. Now, you can't see them, but there are live dancers down there. There's a bunch of live musicians, myself included, making a fool of myself somewhere over here. There is a giant balloon aerialed up, I don't know, maybe about 30 feet in the sky, and then on the wall of the library. And there's also a drone breaking in a sort of political statement about surveillance. But The thing I want you to point out to is this thing. So this is a community interested in where the tech is taking you. Web3, blockchain, as you should be. Well, as you know, Second Life was alive and well and very, 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 very much working 10 years ago and older. In fact, a veteran of EZTV, a dear friend of Victor and myself, Michael Wright, who passed a while ago, was a master of Second Life and taught a course of it over a decade ago at Otis. So we have a dance company in The Hague in the Netherlands watching the live dance on a crude smartphone and in real time puppeting digital avatars in Pompidou with the live dancers and projecting them back with a latency, I would say, of maybe only a second or two. And since they were smart people, the choreography was fluid enough that it didn't have to be rock solid and on the beat. Now, we had catalog and printed out flyers saying this is going to be a live transmission from The Hague. But of course, we live in a post-literate world. Nobody reads anything. So we were handing out all this stuff. Everyone thought, oh yeah, great, they projected some crude animations they made. No one knew that what they were witnessing almost a decade ago was something still technologically very rare, to say the least, and incredibly rare a decade ago. Now, at the same time EZTV was doing the West Hollywood sign, it was in a golden age, and it scored what the LA Times called the first bona fide video theater hit. A documentary on Jack Kerouac that ran, this poster says Fort Solid Week. It ran for 5 months. And in fact, we had to expand to 5 theaters, doing 2 screenings a night, 4 nights a week for 5 months to accommodate all the interest. It was done by this force of nature, another person who passed, the late, great Louis McAdams. Now, if you go to the LA River, on the west side of the river, you will find Louis McAdams Park. And there's a sculpture of Louis there made by the artist who did the Vietnam Memorial in DC. Louis was a poet. He was one of the earliest of the beatniks. He knew Allen Ginsberg. He introduced Allen Ginsberg to EZTV, and we did 2 videos with Allen. And he did a documentary that changed the conversation. One, at that point, documentaries were done on 16mm film. This was shot proudly on video. It was projected proudly on video, and people loved it. At a time when there were filmmakers who wore buttons that said, better dead than video. So those of you who are technos, those of you who love the evolution of tools, understand the biases that some of you hear and witness about NFTs or about blockchain or about crypto. It is part of the narrative that there is always a tech lag. There is always a lag between the know-it-alls, the journalists, and the experimental class. And be proud. So Louis did an art piece he called the 40-year art piece, and he lobbied for the salvation, restoration, and revitalization of the LA River, which those of you old enough to remember the LA River when it basically was a sewer. Louis is one of a handful of people who Wyatt is not today. And towards the end of his life, he got the US government to donate $8 billion for the restoration of the LA River. And he called that an art piece. And I agree that it was. Also at the same time, through the efforts of people like Victor, Dave, a number of other people, one of whom I'll mention much more detailed, EZTV became ground zero in LA in the 1980s for showing digital. Now, we were not the first. I hate the word first, because you always find out somebody in Croatia did it 6 weeks before you did. You know, history is very messy and muddy and cloudy, and we don't take notes very well. So, note to everybody, drop the first word because you're probably wrong. So we weren't the first, but boy, were we early. Boy, were we early in the conversation when showing digital art was, well, that's not really art, you know, you just push a bunch of buttons. And now you do with AI, so, but, you know, but then not so much. Many years later, again, with the USC show, we started chronicling that history and building the museum, building the community. And this is the other person that I wanted to mention, no longer with us. This is the amazing Patrick Prince. Victor introduced me to Patrick. She did a show at EZTV in 1990 that changed the conversation. She was arguably among the first art historians, arguably among the first collectors, arguably among the first curators to realize computers meant something in art. And she amassed one of the most seminal archives and collections, which are now in the permanent collection at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, and makes a major part of their collection. So in '92, after Victor introduced us, we met up a few times and we decided, let's make a gallery. Now, according to the Victoria and Albert Museum, they are right, it was one of the first digital galleries. Not the first, but certainly among the first. But now this is a little hypey for my taste, guys. I didn't write this, the V&A, the curator wrote it. It put digital practices on the map. Is that true? But it's not true. Because activism and the ability to conjure artists to present and get the press to cover it, the New York Times, the LA Times, various people covered it. It mattered. And right now, the V&A in London is doing an exhibition on Patrick. And here they have a little thing on Cyberspace Gallery. And these postcards were made by a certain Victor Acevedo sitting in the audience. And he was humble enough to not put his name on the postcard, so he's not credited. But as a matter of record, Victor's postcards are currently on exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. Congrats. We all know we live in a hybridized world, a world where more and more times we're communicating more and more with more and more people looking at a screen, looking at a phone, looking at a laptop. That didn't just happen. That didn't happen with Skype. That didn't happen with Zoom. That didn't happen with COVID. It's been evolving since the 1970s. And an indispensable name to know if you are going to have any pretense at all at knowing anything about digital art history is a group called Electronic Cafe International. ECI authored the philosophy of telepresence. In the 1970s, they took a dancer in Maryland and a dancer in San Francisco, and using a NASA satellite, had them dance together on a TV screen. Towards the end of my presentation, I'm going to talk about an update we're going to be doing next year in a digital art festival, but let's wait. Ulysses is one of the most famous video artists in the world. His work's in the collection of MoCA, the Whitney. Right now, he's actually in a show at MoCA on MoMA. He's got the goods. Not only did he make hand video art, but he did early telepresence experiments, some of which at EZTV, now using something. I have a problem with the term video phone because it wasn't a video phone, but Electronic Cafe and Barbara T. Smith and Ulysses would say they used a video phone. It transmitted a still image over standard phone lines, and you would either look at it on a TV set, hence video, or you would print it out on fax paper. Pretty low res. Financially, it was a flop. You could buy them for $200. A lot of people had them. A year after, a lot of people had them tossed. But they proved, but the audio was good, but they proved the conversation that you can delocalize the venue. You can globalize the venue. You can communicate art, conferences, sales pitches, accounting records. You can use the what became known as the World Wide Web. Bear in mind, in 1990, the World Wide Web had not yet been invented. Now, 1990 was hardly the first time EZTV did online. We began around 1983 with BBSs, where to the 12 people we knew who had the capability, we would beam out what's happening at EZTV next week. By 1987, we did an international communication connecting Arthur C. Clarke in Sri Lanka with EZTV via KPFK radio. People would call in KPFK, ask a question, someone would type the question into a keyboard. It would take 20 minutes to go to Sri Lanka. For you tech nerds, we're talking 58K baud modems. 20 minutes to go to Sri Lanka, and then sitting in EZTV captivated one letter at a time, you would see Arthur C. Clarke's answer, which would then be read on the radio at KPFK. 1987. A year later, someone in Finland claimed they invented the chat room. Well, that's why we don't like the word first. What I liked to do is I liked to play with human beings. I like human beings, some of them. I like dancers, I like actors, I love performance artists. And I loved combining giant scale projection with dancers in unusual settings. So this is 2005, it's a piece called Rage to Know. And I took a camera crane and I put a projector on it. So I could move the projector as a light source. So it could be a gobo, it could be any color I wanted. I had a production switcher, but it could also be video. And so we projected onto various surfaces throughout the experience, video on a crane, but also massive projections, which we had been doing for quite a long time. As I said, I'm not going to tell a lot about my resume, but when I first came to LA, I paid my rent by doing what would now be called raves. I made abstract images, and I sold them. At that point, the really only competitor I knew was a guy named Ron Hayes. I not only made a living, but I had a life in this wild club scene, which is how I ended up at EZTV, because a lot of the people that go to clubs are gay people. So my audience was West Hollywood. But I took that knowledge and turned it into several generations of projection experience, which was then catapulted with the next generation of EZTV. So about a decade ago and a little earlier, what Mark Zuckerberg thinks is going to be the future was alive and well. So Second Life was being used by several million people, and this is a live dance event in zero gravity because, it's the internet and there's no physics. A dance piece by Vanessa Blaylock and Company. And Vanessa was the dance company in The Hague in the Netherlands that did the transmission piece I showed you before, the projecting. So there were all of these experiences. So the future's already happened. The future has already happened several times. And when Web3 comes along, it's going to look like 10 years ago. Of course, it will get better. But the first incarnations, we've been there and done that. And part of the history and part of what I feel is our obligation as sentient beings is to remember. We must remember what has already happened, or we are going to invent it again. And if we didn't do that, if we built, to use Isaac Newton's standing on the shoulders of giants, if we kept building instead of going around in circles, we would be a lot further along. There are people who literally call the 20th century the lost century because so many of the innovations in the early part of the century got forgotten, like Nikola Tesla and others. Same thing with Second Life. All right, so here's where I'm gonna hopefully not get emotional. So I am biased, but I'm not wrong. I would never say that Kate Johnson was a great basketball player. I would never say that Kate Johnson was an amazing mountain climber. I would never say that Kate Johnson was a brain surgeon. But I would say Kate Johnson was a genius. And I would say Kate Johnson was the finest artist I have ever had the privilege to know. And yeah, full disclosure, we lived together for 27 years. Kate started out, she walked in the door at EZTV. She was making a living as an actor. She walked in the door and she said, "Wow, you guys are using computers. I like that." She walked in and she never left. She learned to code. She wrote, she directed, she shot, she animated 2D, she animated 3D, she did the music, and she was one hell of an educator at the Otis College in Art and Design for 20 years. And she's the heart of soul of this story. And the only reason these archives exist, and the only reason this story exists, is because she gave up a career in Hollywood and decided to be an obscure, dare I say, unknown artist. So, Kate took my love of projection and she went a little further. There she is projecting 33 stories on LA City Hall. There she is projecting on all of the buildings of the Getty simultaneously. In addition to the projection at City Hall, she turned Grant Park into a river of video screens leading up to City Hall and projected, all synchronized, on the windows. And Bergamot Station, 3 IMAX projectors ganged together with a hypnotizer, 10 IMAX projectors ganged together with a hypnotizer. I have no idea how many that, but 110 simultaneous streaming channels of video, and she figured out the tech how to do it. She's pretty good. What's that? Years? 2011, 2017, 2015. But we use this knowledge to preserve other people too. I mentioned Ron Hayes. Now, ostensibly, Ron was my competition, but he was really friendly competition. He, like so many others in the EZTV story, died of AIDS also. He wasn't really part of EZTV, but we played the same gigs together. And when he got really sick, he turned over some of his best clients to me, and it changed my trajectory, and it certainly changed my resume. 9 years ago, for our 35th anniversary in West Hollywood Park, we not only did that piece where we did the transmission from the Netherlands that nobody knew was a transmission, but on that balloon, we projected a lot of Ron stuff. Now, there was a reason to that madness. There's the Pacific Design Center. In 1985, and I'm going to mention a woman named Joan Collins, not the TV actress, and I'll mention her again in a few minutes, but she and Ron were commissioned to do the inauguration of the Pacific Design Center, and they floated a balloon in the air, and they projected onto it in 1985. Now, those of you who know tech know that was not easy. Projectors were fixed focus. Projectors needed lots of cooling. They didn't look or work like that. So this story about tools, you can't separate it. But I'm going to say something now that I think I said to Dina and Cody when I first met them. I don't care how you make stuff. I love Rodin sculptures. I have stood in as many cities as I have been able to afford to stand in front of Rodin sculptures, and every one breaks my heart. Never have I wondered, gee, I wonder what the ratio on the bronze was. Normally it's like 88% copper and 12% zinc. I wonder, what the smelting temperature was for the bronze. I wonder what the cast was made of. I wonder how they forged it. I don't care. I know I can Google it. I know that there's probably a mouse or something. I don't care how you make it. I only care why you make it. For me, the tools are how you do it. They're the manufacturing process. They're not the point, unless you're an engineer, and then they're the point. But I want to know, what does it do for me? A Rodin sculpture breaks my heart. The smelting temperature and the alloy ratio is an interesting side note. One of my problems with the way computer and digital art has been exhibited up till now is there's far too much discussion about how.
Yes.
I don't care. Yes, I know you used a computer. Yes, I know you used software. Yes, I know you used a frame buffer. Yes, I know you used some sort of serving system. Yes, I know you had some way to output it. Yes, yes, yes. And when I'm in a nerdy mood, I will Google it. But it's not the point. Knowing it was printed on an Iris inkjet printer is too much information. Just like when you look at a painting on canvas, gee, I wonder what brand of linen they use. I wonder what brush number they used for that brush. I can find out. I only care if it does anything for me. Which is why it's been a hard, long road, and which is why digital art is still a second-class citizen. And it is, and if you think otherwise, you haven't done your homework. It is a second-class citizen because it doesn't talk enough about art. It talks too much about tools. So, in our long road, remember Yahoo? Anybody remember Yahoo?
Yes.
Remember websites? Anybody remember websites? Well, there was a time, remember books? There was a time when, well, gee, I wonder what website I should go look at. You would go to, remember bookstores? You would go to a bookstore and you would buy a book which would tell you which websites to look up. Now, in the amazing classic, way cool websites, dude, they list about 5 websites having to do with computer art. None of the ones you expect are on that list. 4 of them no longer exist. One does. Guess who?
Who?
EZTV.
Oh, wow.
Remember physical stuff? Now, I'm not saying physical stuff was better. Do not get me wrong. All I'm going to go to the point is that whatever you guys think is the hottest, coolest, most wonderful, shiny object won't be very shortly. So, we paid our rent selling videotapes. This was, remember the Monkees? Hey, hey, we're the Monkees. Well, Mike Nesmith of the Monkees, the principal songwriter, went on to create a video art VHS label called Pacific Arts. So he tried to sell some of our stuff, didn't sell very many. Then DVDs, yeah. If any of you know who Barbara T. Smith is, you will know that she was not just arguably LA's greatest performance artist, but among a trillion other things she did, she experimented with computers. in the very, very early 1970s, creating enormous fiberglass installations that had sound and light generated by computers that she collaborated with scientists from CalTech. Barbara's a trip. She had a one-person show at the Getty this year for 6 months. She was in Coded, the LACMA show. She's in a show at MoCA right now. She's going to have a show at the ICA, and she's 92. She's doing okay. Books, printed books. Susanna B. Dakin was born of privilege, and she didn't like it. And she proceeded to give away almost all of her money, creating one of the first organizations in Africa to fight female genital mutilation, working with the bioengineers to find scientists who would study nature as design motifs and design influences, and creating the 18th Street Arts Center, where EZTV has been a proud artist in residence for now since 2000. So she wrote a memoir, we published it. And then Blu-ray, that lasted about a week. So I mentioned Kate, and I said she's a genius, and I admit I'm not objective. So Kate's first attempt to do a PBS documentary, she wins an Emmy. So that's a documentary on an obscure Croatian ballerina who helped transform American dance. So how do I know all this stuff? Well, I was there, but also Kate and I preserved a lot of it. John's video deck, still alive and well. All the generations of the cameras. This computer given to me by Dr. Timothy Leary, who we used to do shows with, and he did shows at EZTV. And boxes and boxes and boxes of ephemera. So when I say I can prove what I'm saying, I can prove what I'm saying. And what are we going to do about it? Some of you, but sadly probably not all of you, know SIGGRAPH. Now, I've always had a problem with the name. It's a little beyond nerdy. So SIGGRAPH, so SIG is old school nerd talk for special interest group. So SIGGRAPH is the special interest group for computer graphics and interactive techniques. And it's part of the Association of Computing Machinery. Guys, go to Madison Avenue, get a name change. But SIGGRAPH has been EZTV's best friend for 40 years, especially LA SIGGRAPH. I mentioned Joan Collins, she is the chair. So for the last 3 years, we have been interviewing seminal artists. No way we could do them all, but we picked seminal ones. Oh yeah, we also included Victor and Dave, but deservedly so. And it's in ramp up to next year. And it's next year that I'm really here to talk to you about and to entice you to perhaps help join forces with. So next year, Santa Monica College, in celebration of EZTV's 45th anniversary, is going to do a 1-month art gallery show in their best gallery, and then up to 6 months of screenings, panel discussions, lectures, site-specific live performances, and we want everybody in the LA digital scene to be represented. We are calling, for lack of a better word, now the marketeers among you will come up with a better name, we want a Congress. We want NFT Tuesdays to be part of the Congress. We want Crypto Mondays to be part of the Congress. We want EZTV to be part of the Congress. We want anyone and everyone to send one person, although you're all welcome, to sit in a room together and ignore our differences and see our commonality. Because to this day, we are ghettoized. To this day, we are siloed. To this day, there are many, many respected people in the art world who don't digital art and don't get them started about AI. So I want the beginnings of an ongoing discussion where we reach out and we share and we all archive each other, because we are not all going to survive. I'm sorry, crypto world, but we are not all going to make it.
That's true.
Many, if not most, will not. So if you save our stuff and we save your stuff and we save that guy's stuff and we save Peter's stuff and we save the stuff, there's a chance that in 200 years, one of those will still exist. So it's been going on a long time. 1993, computer art still struggling for acceptance. Still in 1993. I don't know how many of you went to see Coded. I was a fan. Now, again, I'm biased. About 10 years ago, Leslie Jones, the curator, consulted with Kate and I and asked us for some recommendations of some of the people in the show. They didn't take everybody. There's a certain person who presented here a few weeks ago who was left out. He was the first person we recommended. But they did take some of the people. Yeah. David M. Now, David M. Certainly had an illustrious career well before he ever heard of EZTV. But I think EZTV possibly showed David M. more than anyone else ever did. Going back a long, long, long way. We've been an advocate, a supporter. Nowhere near can we do what we tried, but we tried. And they didn't take him. They took Barbara T. Smith. They took Rebecca Allen. They took a number of people who also should have been in there. But, you know, major show, major museum. You know, the New York Times never reviewed this show. The LA Times only reviewed it a few weeks before it closed, and it wasn't exactly a rave. The smaller art press generally supported it, but to this day, the blue chip journalistic elite still struggling for acceptance. We can do something about that. So, this was a couple of years ago. This was EZTV's 40th anniversary, and at the end, and this was the last time Kate spoke in public. She asked anyone in the audience who had been part of EZTV in any way to get up, and there's Victor over there. I said, and these are people in every medium. So I used to say that what we show is non-genre specific and tool agnostic. Again, you made it with paper clips. If it moves me, we'll show it. You made it with a supercomputer, whoop-de-doo, it better be good. You want to do a live performance, you want to sing a song, you want to tell a poem, you want to have a ritual fetishistic sex performance, if it's good, and it was good. So what am I up to today? I didn't tell you what I was doing for the last 40 years, but I'll tell you what I'm doing right now. And there's a couple of people in the audience who have something to do with this. But first I'm going to start with hypnagogic. There's a force of nature named Kate Lynch. Brilliant, brilliant. She's one of the co-organizers of Crypto Mondays, if any of you guys are part of that world. She and I have started an initiative, a kind of a think tank, to advocate for, to curate, to exhibit, and to represent good art. Now, most of it will be digital. A lot of it will be AI. But if somebody shows up with paper clips and they move us, we're going to show it. This guy is the notorious, legendary John Fleck. One of the great, yeah, he's great. One of the great performance artists in the world. I was telling Dina before that if you were to go to law school and you took the elective on artist law, like I did, the first case you would study is Karen Finley versus National Endowment for the Arts, the so-called NEA 4, the reason why the United States of America does not have direct grants to artists. It gives grants to organizations. It does not give grants to artists. Now, John's one of the reasons. He's one of the NEA4. Now, EZTV for the last, since 2000, has been in the 18th Street Art Center in Santa Monica, California, proudly so. Among the organizations there is a group called Highways Performance Space. Back in the late 80s, Highways was ground zero for the most provocative, the academic word is challenging, the most challenging performance art arguably seen anywhere. Now, a lot of it was feminist and a whole lot of it was queer. And so back in good old Washington, D.C., a bunch of ultra-conservative Republicans would swing a flyer from Highways saying, "This is what our tax dollars are going to." And excuse my language, but I hope you know it's for the best of reasons. They said, "We're giving money to faggot art." And so they stopped giving money to art that was queer-centric, openly queer in any way, or even feminist, or even provocative. And John was defunded. The co-founder of Highways was defunded. Karen Finley, a normal exhibitor there, was defunded. And they sued. And they took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and of course they lost. So our country changed. So Santa Monica remains one of the few places in the United States of America that gives grants directly to artists. And among the numerous hats I wear is I'm Arts Commissioner in Santa Monica. And we are really, really proud that we can cobble together about $2 million a year and give it directly to artists. And part of where we need to be as a nation is we need to love our artists. We need to nurture our artists. We need to endorse our artists, and we need to encourage them to be provocative. We need to encourage them to be challenging, because we already got Disney. We've already got the alternative. Let's do other things. That's Alina Kalinovskaya, originally from Belarus. She's an attorney, and she created a nonprofit organization in Europe for the combating of sex trafficking. She and I are collaborating with the University of Nebraska Medical Center, which for some reason has one of the most advanced imaging capabilities on the planet, and part of next year's Digital Art Festival. I mentioned Electronic Cafe did a dancer in Maryland, a dancer in San Francisco, and they beamed it together. We are going to, among many other things, Alina is a dancer. Alina is going to dance with a dancer in Omaha, Nebraska by hologram. And it will be, if it works, we can't promise the tech actually works yet, but they say it's probably going to. It will be the longest distance transmission of life-size holograms. She will be in Santa Monica dancing with a hologram that's from Omaha, and the live dancer in Omaha will be dancing with her hologram. And Diego Morales, cellist for the LA Opera, who's also done some pretty experimental stuff with Yo-Yo Ma, you know Diego?
Well, I know Yo-Yo.
Yeah, right. So they know each other, and they play with each other. Diego will be playing live in Santa Monica, and hopefully someone of his equal will be in Omaha. This is a piece by the incredible artist Edith Sut, originally from Estonia. She's a musician, she's a performance artist, she's a writer, she's a photographer, she's everything. We're doing a piece on a very esoteric aspect of Buddhism as a performance art piece, and it's a little rough around the edges in many ways. I don't mean the technique, but the subject matter. And we're looking forward to that. And Edith and Nicolina Page are working on a documentary. I know I'm almost up. This is literally the second to last slide. We want a real conversation. We love where the world is going. Yeah, AI, you're going to do heart surgeries and VR. Great. We're all there. We're supportive. We love it. We're not negative. We just want an honest conversation about if social media is any indicator of the addictive quality of electronic experiences. Imagine near photorealistic immersive simulation. The potential for terrorism, the potential for bullying, the potential for financial scams, the potential for mind control on every level cannot be ignored. And we want a conversation in front of the conversation instead of at the end. I always use the example that we're usually in the caboose. Usually we're churning along and we look on a website, oh, this new technique's coming. Oh, isn't it? By the time it comes, it's too late to do anything about it. So we're going to do a documentary based on an amazing guy named Win Schwartau. In 1991, Win testified in Congress warning the risks of terrorism on the internet, of financial scams on the internet, of bullying on the internet. And the congressman said, Mr. Schwartau, why would a bad guy ever use the internet? Well, we're going to do a doc to talk. And then this is a mock-up of part of what Joan Collins envisions for the Digital Art Festival. I'm sure the city's going to stop us, and there's going to be insurance and permit things that won't let us do it. But she wants to fly an enormous TV set over the campus on a helicopter. We're going to have indigenous people recreate their ritualistic art as digital experiences. We want to put David M. projected in the windows, and we are going to have Alina's live performance in there and lots of video projections. And the thing about John, we're doing a documentary with another notorious performance artist, the Dark Bob, on the history of LA performance art. And we feel this screen, these phones, these laptops, we feel like we're pushed against the glass. We're pushed against the glass, and we want the glass to disappear. Thank you. Sure. Is anyone still awake? Do I have a question?
Yes, sir.
No questions?
I have
Uh-oh. Okay.
for now.
You're fine.
Yeah, I'm good. There you go.
Oh, hi. Great talk. Thank you for that. When I saw the title of your talk today, I was wondering if you were going to talk about DAOs and how that might fit into the the way you're seeing things.
Okay.
Or not.
So, I've dabbled in DAOs. I'm not part of one currently. Full disclosure, I have a lot of pieces of paper I don't use stuffed in a drawer, and one of them is a certificate from the MIT Media Lab in cryptocurrencies. So I'm not unaware of your world. I am still, though, not evolved into it. I have been in discussions with several DAOs, one in the UK, one on the East Coast, and one here. And I have yet to see how the organizational structure doesn't get in its way, at least in the ones I've personally experienced. There are so many, I'm sure there's every existing model, but the ones that I have seen, hierarchy exists for a reason. Now, we don't want authoritarianism, and we don't want dictatorships, and we want free and fair elections. But the car I drive has one steering wheel. Someone needs the responsibility. In the models that I've seen, they're stepping on their own toes. Will that change? Of course. Will it be a bona fide, real alternative to so many of the centralized structures? Of course. But we can't forget issues with cybersecurity. Remember, in the decentralized world we're talking about, goes through the most centralized technology the world has ever known. So in order to decentralize, you have to utilize the most centralized tech that exists. And it's incredibly hackable. And yes, blockchain is far more resistant to hackers. You know quantum computing is coming. You know we are about to enter a world where yes means no, zero means one, left means right, and the ability is going to get tougher. Now, you guys have to evolve faster than that, and I believe some of you will. For me, I'm not skilled enough to see how it's going to work. I don't know if that answered your question, other than yes, I've looked into it, and I ain't signed on the dotted line yet within. Yeah.
And I'll ask you some questions afterwards in order to have consideration for everybody else here who might have a question that's more relevant to everyone.
Okay, I guess that's it.
I feel like we would love to hear your questions. Here.
Well, no, it's specifically about something that I'm developing, and so that's kind of like on the shelling thing, and so I don't want to be shelling right now.
We got one over here.
Thank you for this talk. Thank you for imploring us to archive and for archiving so much art and lived experience over so many years.
Thank you for this.
My question is specifically about the art and science of meta war and the documentary that you're creating about that conversation. And I'm sure I'll have to watch it to find out. But in a in the general sense, my question is, do you feel that there are actual solutions that can surpass our desire for addiction and those pleasure circuits? Is that an organizational solution? Is it just an internal individual solution? What kinds of core parts of that conversation are you looking to explore in the documentary?
Thank you. That's a
That is a
great
good
question. Thank you for that. I think the answer is all of the above. I think this needs to be cherished. We could have all done this on Zoom, but we didn't. For whatever reasons you were motivated to get out of your apartment and come over here, you did something that is essentially human. As we become, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, and I'm probably going to use the wrong word, but as we become more cybernetic, as we become more cyborgs, as our phones are chips in our brain, we will have more options. Some of them will be very good. I believe the individual spirit is always what matters. I am not a libertarian, but I do believe that personal autonomy, that personal knowledge, that personal choices are going to make the difference. Are there going to be a lot of lost souls? I promise you, there are going to be a lot of lost souls. You don't have to be one of them. Now, I grew up in the South Bronx, like I said. There was a controversial preacher there. Some people loved him in the community. A lot of people hated him in the community. I didn't have much money when I was a kid. I don't have much money now, but I had less then. There was a guy named Reverend Ike. Some people considered him a civil rights leader. Some people considered him a charlatan. He used to say, the best thing you can do for the poor is not be one of them. In a lot of ways, the best thing you can do to avoid the problems that are ahead is to know there are problems ahead and to do your darndest to figure out your personal choice, your personal truth. Actors talk about emotional truth. We have to start talking about reality truth. That author, Win Schwartau, he talks about reality distortion, that it is going to be harder and harder to differentiate between this and this. In many ways, that'll be wonderful. In some ways, it's going to be a lot cooler to be here than here. And when you can put this on and you can be the Queen of England, and you can be Alexander the Great, and you can have anything you want, why are you going to go back to a small apartment? Why are you going to go back to a car that's having problems? While you're going back to your bills, we need a conversation. We're not going to stop it. I just want you guys to have a seat at the table instead of it all being decided by Bezos and Zuckerberg and Musk. And you can. Thank you again.